In this episode, we're going to be creating some great looking, very versatile shadows in Inkscape. All right, so first, I've got these 4 balloons that I've created, and I created these in OpenAI. So, and they have transparency, and they're fairly complex graphics. So I thought this would be good to use for this demonstration. All right, so I'm guessing the way that you guys know to create drop shadows and such in Inkscape is you select your image that you want to create the drop shadow with. You'll go up to filters and you'll select shadows and glows and you'll select drop shadow. All right, and we're going to do a live preview so we can see it. All right, so we're going to make this kind of a diffused shadow, like the light is not real strong, sunlight, but the kind of diffused light. All right, so we're gonna move our opacity down to about 65%. Okay. All right, so we're gonna make our shadow 65% opaque, or 35% transparent. Well, let's make it 60. Let's go with 60. We'll go with 60% opaque, 40% transparent. And then because our shadow, our light's going to be pretty diffused, let's go ahead and set our blur radius. Let's set it at about 2. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, and then our X offset, we've got 1 on the X offset to the right, and where our vertical offset is 2 from the top down. So it's shifted downward below the image and to the right of the image by 1 pixel and 2 pixels. So let's go ahead and let's do our horizontal and vertical offset the same. Let's set them at, well, let's go with 1.5. 1.5 and 2. We'll use that. Okay, and then I'm going to apply. Okay, so now we have our drop shadow on our first balloon here. And if you grab it, the shadow goes with it. The shadow is actually part of the image, which is one of the drawbacks. Now, if you want to adjust that shadow, you basically have to start over again, right? Okay, but in my opinion, there's a better way of doing it. I'm going to show you the way that I do it. Okay, so we're going to take the balloon here, and the way I do this is you can go in and right click it, select copy, and then right click and select paste, and basically you're creating a duplicate image, okay, because we're going to use one of those images to create a shadow with. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. Okay, so I've got my balloon image here. I've already made a copy of it, and this one I called balloon drop shadow. So we're going to go back up to filters, but this is just going to serve as our shadow this time. We're going to go back up to filters. We're going to select shadow and glows. We're going to select drop shadow. Okay, so it remembered our offsets. We're still at 1.5 offset horizontally, and we're still 2 offset on the vertical. And our shadow type is outer. Okay, well, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that to shadow only. Okay, and do a live preview here. And my blur radius, let me see, my blur radius I'm going to set to 0. I don't want any blur on it at this point. My blur color I'm going to set for full opacity, 100% opaque. So it's like a solid black profile of my original image, and that's what I want. I'm going to select apply. I'm going to close that out. All right, and then I'm on our shadow. I think we made it 60% opaque, right, or 40% transparent. So I've got this selected. So if I go over here to my opacity level here, and I set it for 60, okay, so it's going to be just as transparent and opaque as our filtered version of our image here. All right, so now I'm going to select the fill over here, even though it's not set. It's going to give me this dialog over here where I can set my blur, right? So on the blur, let's see, how much do we have to blur it? That looks, let's say, let's go about 15. I think that's going to look very similar to what we have. Okay, so I just want to be able to move my shadow. It's going to go underneath my original image. So I'm going to go over here to the layers. I'm going to go to my balloon and I'm going to lock it in place. And then I'm going to select my balloon drop shadow again. And now I can move it and grab it without, you know, accidentally grabbing the balloon here. So we've got it 1 pixel, 1 pixel to, or 1.5 pixel to the left and 2 pixels down. So I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it here and get it in about the same position as the other one. It does look like it needs to be diffused a little bit more, um, a little more blurry, I think, compared to the other one. Yeah, I think that looks much better. Let me see here. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's got it. Okay, so now these look almost identical. If you look at the drop shadow on this one and the drop shadow on this one, the difference is those are two completely separate objects, right? So if I want to change it, let's, right now it's set up so that the light looks like it's coming from the upper left. So what if I want it to look like it's coming from the upper right? Well, all I have to do is grab my shadow and move it so that it looks like the shadow is coming from the upper right instead of the upper left, right? Okay, now I can group these together so that if I move the balloon, the shadow goes with me, or I can just select them. First, I need to unlock my balloon here. I can just draw a box around the two. You can see that both of them are selected. You see the two separate boxes, and I can grab it and I can move it wherever I want, and the shadow follows it so that once I get my shadow set, I can move the object with the shadow. If I want to, I can group them together, like that. So I don't have to worry about selecting both of them. When I select the balloon, the shadow is automatically grouped with it, so it's selected as a group rather than individual objects. I can right click it and go back and select ungroup again so that now I can move the balloon, I can move the shadow. So let's say I just want it to look like it's coming off of the page a little bit, right? So I kind of want to center it over the balloon. I want to increase the size, scale the shadow up a little bit. I've got that selected. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go into my alignment tools, and last selected, I'm going to center it horizontally and vertically, and then I'm going to group them together. Okay, so now it just looks like the balloon's kind of sitting above the page. It gives it a little bit of depth. All right, so that is how I make my drop shadows. And the reason that they look just as good as just using the filters, but when you create a separate object and make a shadow out of it, it allows you to be able to tweak any part of it. If you want to go back, you want to change the opacity. If you want to change the blurriness, you want to change how it's offset from the original image, you can do that. Okay, you don't have to start over from scratch. You can modify it however you want. All right, so the other thing that we can do, and I've made another copy of it here, and this is going to be called my perspective shadow. All right, so I am going to lock the original one, right, so that I can't move it for now. All right, so I'm going to go back up to filters. I'm going to go to shadows and glows. I'm going to go drop shadow. I'm going to look at the live preview there by checking the box. I've got 100% opaque. I've got 0 on the blur. That's what I want. I want just a solid black version of that image. I'm going to select apply. Okay, now for my perspective shadow, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to select this flip, this vertical flip. Okay, all right, so I've got that. All right, now what I want to do is I want to skew it this way a little bit. I want it to look like the light is coming, from low in the horizon, from the right, from the upper right, but low in the horizon. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to move it over a bit, scale it up a bit, and then I want to kind of rotate it to get it kind of flat, in front of it, like the balloon is It's got some space between the balloon and the ground, and the light that's coming through behind it, slightly above it, but behind it to the right is going to give me that shadow in front of it on the ground. Okay, so now that we've got that, what I want to do is I'm going to change this to 60% opaque, and the light is fairly diffused. So what I want to do is I want to go in here, I want to blur it quite a bit. I want to blur it quite a bit so it loses some of its definition, right? Because the light is weak. Okay, so we got that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my perspective shadow. I'm going to unlock my balloon here with the drop shadow so I can select it too. And then I'm going to group those together, okay? So now I've got my balloon, my drop shadow, and my perspective shadow all grouped together. All right, so this one, I'm just going to hide it. I'm going to lock it and I'm going to hide it because I don't need it for now. But what I want to do now is I want to go to my background and make my background visible. And then you can see where the sun is back here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this balloon down. And I'm going to put it over here. And put it in my scene here with my drop shadow over there on the hill. Now, that looks pretty good, you know, taking a little clip art balloon and being able to make these real versatile, not only drop shadows, but perspective shadows and Inkscape. So this is, I think, a better, much more versatile way of creating shadows of any type in Inkscape, whether it's drop shadows or perspective shadows. I think they look really good, and you can tweak them to your heart's content, get them to look exactly how you want. The problem with doing the filtered version of it, but having it as part of your image is once you create it, what you see is what you have, and you can't change it. You have to undo it and start over again. But with this makes it really, really great, you know, for being able to get the look that you want. So anyway, that's a wrap on this episode. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and I will see you next time in the TinkerzLab.